a train 30 minutes out of Boston.
We're heading to a place known for some pretty famous trials back in the day, but if you don't know it from that, you might know it from Hocus Pocus.
That's right, we're in Salem. Now getting to Salem is super easy from Boston. It is a 30-minute train, so not even a very long journey. For a round trip it cost us $32 all up, so $16 each for a round trip, so pretty affordable and definitely an awesome day trip to do from Boston.
Now if you saw our Boston video, you'll know that we did the Freedom Trail, and the way that you do the Freedom Trail is that you follow a red brick line all through the city, taking you across different sites. If you haven't seen that video, we'll link it up here. But we've stumbled across a line here in Salem. It's yellow paint, we don't know what it is, but we're following it and seeing where it takes us.
So as Rosh mentioned, there is this yellow/red line in the ground, and now it used to be just a red line, it is now a yellow line, and it is the Salem Heritage Trail. So similar to the Freedom Trail in Boston, it is a trail that goes all through Salem, taking you to all the top sites here to visit. Now the reason why it's kind of half red, half yellow, it used to be completely red, but in 2020, I believe it was, Salem recognized that the red line had kind of a negative connotation back in its history, and it was a bit of a discriminatory practice to have the red line in the ground. So in 2020, I believe it was, they repainted it yellow in recognition of the fact that that red line has a negative connotation. So it is now yellow. You can see remnants of the red, but largely a yellow line. So we're going to follow it and see where it takes us today. We have arrived to our first stop here on the Heritage Trail, and it is the Corwin house, aka the Witch House, as it is more commonly known. And this was the house of Jonathan Corwin, or Judge Jonathan Corwin I should say, who was one of the judges who presided over the famous Salem witch trials in the 1600s. Normally you can pay to go inside the house and see a few of the rooms, but the reason why this house is so famous, aside from who used to live there, is that it is one of the few remaining structures here in Salem with direct ties to the Salem witch trials. So it's definitely very famous and probably one of, if not the most visited spot here in Salem.
Unfortunately, the Witch House is only open Thursday through to Sunday, and we are here on a Wednesday. We actually leave tomorrow, so we couldn't come when it was open, but it's still worth coming to, even just to look from the outside, because it is such an old building, and it's pretty crazy to think about the things that happened in and around this building right here.
Something else to mention about the Witch House, or the Corwin House, before we move on, is that it was built in the 1600s, so it is incredibly old. I believe it was restored a bit in the 1900s, but this is a very old house and it's pretty cool and spooky looking.
Now, if you don't know a lot about the Salem witch trials, I did a bit of reading on the train to Salem today, and I believe it all kind of started with a little girl. She was the minister's daughter, and she randomly started having fits, was acting really strange, unexplained behaviour, and they couldn't put a diagnosis on it. And obviously back then, knowledge around biology, psychology, health conditions was very, very limited. So they decided that she had been bewitched. And soon after, I believe her cousin was displaying similar behaviour, and then her friend. And so they had these girls that were bewitched, and they pushed for answers asking who bewitched them. And the young girl said that it was a woman in her household. I don't know what her role was. I read that she was enslaved, so I'm not sure the exact details around that, but essentially they decided that this woman had been practicing witchcraft, and they accused her of being a witch. Now from there, that woman was then questioned. I read that she was tortured and beaten to get answers on exactly what she'd been doing and who else was involved. And of course, just to stop all of that from happening, she then accused someone else. And then it was like a chain reaction. The next person who was accused would accuse someone else just so that they wouldn't be under the heat anymore. And then mass hysteria took over. And I don't believe it took long for a lot of people to start being accused of being witches or practicing witchcraft. Almost 200, I think, were accused, and I think around 25 people died as a result of it, whether they were killed or died in prison. But I found some really interesting information about how they were trialed, I suppose, and how they were proved to be witches. I think it was almost the opposite. You kind of had to prove that you weren't a witch, and it largely fell on the accuser to decide your fate, I suppose. It was definitely not innocent until proven guilty. They had tests, witch tests. I read one that was a swimming test, and essentially they believed that water was like a purity medium, I suppose, and that if they were a witch, they would float in the water because the water would reject them, and if they weren't a witch, they would sink. Now, most people will float, and if you floated, you were deemed a witch, and that was that. There were some other pretty weird tests too, just tests that made no sense at all and were very hard to pass.
We have now made our way over to the Salem Witch Museum, which is a pretty popular attraction here in Salem, and for obvious reasons. Entrance is $17.50 for an adult, and during the winter months you do actually have to book online, and I believe tickets only release the day of, so from midnight that morning. You book a time, you go in at your allotted time. Now, we're not actually going to go inside today. We spent a lot of time deciding if we wanted to go inside, but from all the reviews we read online, a lot of people weren't sure that it was worth the price they paid. Now, I think it would be super interesting, and if we weren't on a budget, we'd probably do it regardless of those reviews, but given we are trying to be a bit careful with our money, we thought maybe we'd skip this one at this time, but it'll definitely be on our list next time we come to Salem. I believe inside there are a couple different presentations and stuff on the witch trials and things like that, providing a bit of history to the events that occurred here in Salem. So it'd be a very cool experience, but like I said, not on our agenda today. But something else worth noting as well is that for obvious reasons, October is a super busy time to visit Salem, and so the museum does have super extended hours. I think it's open 7 days a week and quite long hours, so if you are coming in October, you definitely need to make sure you pre-buy your tickets, and similar with any other attractions like the Witch House and things like that, definitely pre-book, because a lot of people love to come to Salem in spooky season, and it's obvious why.
And just across the road from the Salem Witch Museum is Salem Common, which is, I suppose, the equivalent of Boston Common, which is the massive park in Boston City. And it's pretty nice, pretty. Big centerpiece right there with some Christmas decorations. Not as many squirrels here as there were in Boston Common. Interesting observation. We're going to make our way back over to the Heritage Trail now and follow that yellow brick line, yellow paint line.
We've now walked over to two other pretty historical spots here in Salem. One being the Charter Street Cemetery, also known as the Burying Point, which is where a lot of pretty famous people in Salem's history are buried, including some of the prominent judges from the Salem witch trials. This is one of America's oldest maintained cemeteries. It was actually founded in 1637, so super old. Like I said, a lot of prominent people for Salem buried here, including some of those witch trial judges. But right next door to the cemetery is the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. It's symbolically located here, obviously due to, the judges being buried there, and is here to represent and honour the victims of the Salem Witch Trials. It's meant to be a place of reflection and remembrance of the trials, and to kind of learn from the mistakes of those trials. So it's pretty somber here. It's definitely very quiet, but we're going to have a look around and then continue on with our tour of Salem.
So the Heritage Trail has led us to the Salem National Historic Site. As you can see behind me, we are right on the water's edge here. There are some massive birds. They look like giant ducks. I'm wondering if they are geese. Let me know down in the comments below what type of bird this is. Okay, I must have sounded really stupid before. These are obviously not ducks. I think they're geese. But at this historical site, we can see the Friendship, which I believe is this massive ship right here. Unfortunately, it's currently getting some restoration work done to it, but I'd imagine it's pretty nice underneath those tarps. And this Friendship ship is a full-size, fully operational replica of the original Friendship, which is a cargo ship built in Salem in 1797. Sounds like they're saying, wow!
We've done quite a bit of walking so far. We've made a few stops, but now I'm wanting a sweet treat, and there is one place in Salem you absolutely have to visit. It's pretty historical. We're at America's oldest candy store. That's right, the whole of America, this is the oldest operational candy store. It started in 1806.
That's 200 years old.
Yep.
Whoa!
Wild. Okay, we've come out of Ye Olde Pepper Company. It's very overwhelming in there. Lots of amazing looking truffles. I believe it's all homemade in the candy store. But there was only one thing we knew we absolutely had to get. And it is the Gibraltars. I don't know how to say it. But this is the first ever commercially made candy in America. So it's pretty old, so 200 years old. They actually had some in the candy store that were over 200 years old, which is a bit disturbing. But this was the obvious choice for us to try. It comes in 2 variations, so you get 2 peppermint, 2 lemon. So we'll have to give them a go. The other thing we considered getting in the candy store were called blackjacks, and that was America's first ever stick candy. So they developed it as an alternative to these, but we ended up just going with the Gibraltars, and let's give it a go. Very interesting. Why does it look like a pastizzi? I think from what I read, they start off quite hard, and then the more you like suck on them, it turns into a bit softer, kind of like an after dinner mint type thing. Come on, that's a pastizzi if I've ever seen one. But let's give it a go. I don't know if I bite it. Okay, quite hard. Minty. Okay, I don't think I meant to bite into it. It's really nice. It just tastes kind of like a peppermint, like hard-boiled candy type thing.
Like a candy cane, but flat.
Yeah, I love candy canes. It's really delicious. I'll be interested to keep kind of going on this and see if it gets softer.
I would definitely recommend picking up some Gibraltars when you're in Salem. It was an interesting candy, but it wasn't bad at all. It's like a hard-boiled candy, but they haven't cut it into smaller pieces. Highly recommend. And it's funny, like over the last few videos, we've kind of tried a lot of firsts. So in Nashville, we tried America's first ever combined chocolate bar or candy bar, the Goo Goo, and that for me has been the highlight so far. If you want to see that video, I'll link it up there. And today we tried the first candy made commercially in America. So I wonder what the next first thing we'll try. I'm going to make a statement. It might be controversial, but I'm going to stand by it. I think that Massachusetts is the prettiest state in the United States that we've been to so far. The architecture, little streets, the red brick buildings. Oh my gosh, it's like nothing in the USA we've seen.
20 minutes later, I'm still going. It's really delicious though, but definitely takes a while to get through, more than a small hard-boiled candy, but you can always pack it away and save it for later, but it's so delicious, I'm just determined to finish it.
We've now made it to the House of the Seven Gables, which is said to be one of the must-see things here in Salem. And there's a few ways that you can do it. You can do a tour inside, but if you want to save a little bit of money, seeing the gardens is also a cheaper option. The gardens are meant to be absolutely beautiful. However, today it's closed. I think it's closed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So a bit unlucky for us, but it's not all bad, because if you walk around the corner to the end of the street, you stand where I stand and you get a pretty nice view of the grounds and the houses. So that's always an option, even if it's not open. And you might be wondering, what is the House of the Seven Gables? Well, it's the setting of a famous book written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The book is fictional, but the house itself is quite obviously very real. Something really cool I've noticed as we stroll along the streets near the House of the Seven Gables is a lot of the houses have these little plaques stating who they were built by and when. Some of these buildings are super old, they're all beautiful and colourful buildings, but it's interesting to see that they've kind of labelled them with those plaques, which is really cool for people from out of town. Very historic, yeah. We've now ventured off the Heritage Trail to make an important stop for all you Hocus Pocus fans. Walked about 20 minutes off the Heritage Trail, and we'll show you why. I'm standing here looking at the location of Max and Dani's house from Hocus Pocus. It's definitely a tourist attraction here in Salem. We're actually the only ones here at the moment, but I imagine in October it gets very busy. But if you do come here, be respectful, because it is actually someone's residence. There are people living there, it's not just a film set, but it's pretty cool to see the house in real life. It's one of a couple different filming locations for Hocus Pocus that are still here in Salem. Now Salem definitely has its own unique architecture compared to Boston. While Boston is a lot of red brick buildings, Salem has a lot of colourful buildings. Definitely a lot of, every building has its own colour, a lot of white buildings, and a few of those historical ones like the witch house, dead black, which is pretty creepy. But definitely like all these standalone houses, quite tall and skinny for the most part, but the colours just really pop and stand out, and definitely a bit of a unique thing to Salem. She always manages to find the pop culture store with all the Pokemon and all the Funko Pops in the world. What's the point? I guess we're going in. And to round out our time here in Salem, we have come to admire the Bewitched Statue right behind me.
And that will do it for our time here in Salem. What a great place to do a day trip from Boston. It's super easy to get here, pretty affordable, and there are just so many fun things to see. We had an amazing time, and it also marks the end of our time in Massachusetts. We hope you enjoyed our 3 videos from this state. It was probably our favourite state in the USA so far. We've absolutely loved it. But we're heading to a new state tomorrow. Our final state we'll be visiting in the USA, and we can't wait to bring you with us. Bye.